On this week's episode of the A to B podcast, I'm joined by DC Cahalane, founder of Republic of Work and current Chief Operating Officer at CityDoc. Having graduated from UCC in 1999 with a degree in Economics and Computer Science, DC went on to work in vodka distribution before spending 15 years with numerous tech startups, including Trustev and Teamwork. DC founded the Republic of Work in 2016 and departed in July of 2020, where he has since become the Chief Operating Officer at CityDoc, the UK's leading healthcare provider of travel testing and vaccinations. Hi DC, how are you?
That makes me sound very impressive. Yeah, we'll get. Do you do PR on the side or anything like that? I was like,
I'm doing
who's
everything
this
myself now. Everything's been done here at Foley headquarters. So yeah.
Well, thank you for a lovely introduction.
No, you're very welcome. You deserve it very much so.
Delighted to be on the podcast today. I hate talking about myself, but at the same time, I recognize the value in sometimes sharing the blunders and the mistakes of a very career. And if I can save anybody from some of them, I'm absolutely dead delighted to get over my natural introvert self, because everybody I know thinks I'm an extrovert, and I'm totally not. I'm just a marketeer, and we're always good about talking and bluffing and putting ourselves out there. But behind the scenes, I love my quietness, and I love my privacy, and I love myself.
I think for the purpose of the podcast was really it's for kind of students who would look at you, I suppose, like I do, and think, Jesus Christ, how do you graduate and get involved with so many startups? It's nice to share that story, and a lot of the lessons you've learned along the way. So there was no question that I had to reach out to you and have you on, and thank you for saying yes, because I am in my final year and I'm just a student, and in no way should you have felt obliged to have come on, but you did, and I really appreciate that.
No, look, my time in UCC was the making of me. And like, I literally, like, no matter where I go in the world or what I do, like, I'll bleed for the place always, because it's not. I mean, and you, especially with COVID at the moment, like, university is not about, it is about academics, but it's in so many, that's why I worry about when everything moves to online learning and that sort of stuff. Do we miss the essential part of university, which is, it's your first time away from home, and like, despite whatever job your mom and your dad have in mind for you, university is the time where you actually get to see what you're good at, what you like. And in an awful lot of people's cases, you know what I mean, suddenly their parents' dreams of them being a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, not there's anything wrong with either, evaporates when people actually get to embrace, they get to see the real world, and they get to see in college, everything that's available to them. And, I've so many friends who went into college to do one thing and either switched or changed or came out with something. And then I have a bunch of friends who, I suppose, like me, where what they did in college bears no resemblance to what they ended up doing in life. But I think we would all agree that those decisions happened in the period of time that we spent on a university campus.
I completely agree. I've met a lot of people who've done one thing in college and have ended up in a completely different industry. And if anything, the academia side of things is great, but college is, I feel, for me anyway, it's for character building. How does a young Dunmanway lad in the 90s decide to study economics and computer science?
I feel like at some point we need to explain that. I mean, the 90s seemed like a long time ago. They weren't really. We were okay. We had pop music and the internet and things like that. No, I mean, look, for me, honestly, it was computers were always my thing. Like, from the earliest age, my family back, and my dad's an architect, and would have at a very early stage in, if you want to call it, the Irish landscape, been one of the first architects in Ireland to get into kind of computer aided design. It seems mad to think that in the 90s we were still not using computers to design houses, but honestly, for the majority of architects, they wouldn't have been. And so we were lucky in that sense, in that we always had like a really good computer in the house, because my dad was self-employed for a large portion of my childhood. so there was always a good computer. I'm the eldest of five boys, and like all five of us would be reasonably tech competent, even though one's a lawyer, one's in the navy, one's in IT, and one then had a very prestigious academic career in UCC, and now is the deputy head of the business school in the University of Sydney. And we
Wow.
just dislike him because he's a massive overachiever, and he's also the baby in the family,
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay, very
so
good.
yeah, it's just can't do anything wrong. But like we all grew up with computers, and look, we were also big gamers as kids, and so I mean, like I was always that kid where the relatives would be ringing, can DC or Donal, as I was at the time, can Donal come and fix the computer for us type stuff. Do you know what I mean? So I was always going to do something computer related, and I loved business as well. So I mean, I suppose for me, what I found when I went into UCC first of all was I went to do computer science in UCC. So you have to do at the time you had to do like there was no essentially the joint honors part came in second year. So I joined it first year and it was computer science. And like to be honest, I struggled a lot because I found it that it was very like my skill set was opening up computers, taking them apart, putting them back together, running the software, that sort of stuff. And like back then, the computer science degree was very maths and physics focused, and it was, it was the theory of computing, and it was like logic and all this sort of stuff. So it was grand, but like it definitely didn't hold my interest. Like I can't claim to have 100% attendance record at lectures now or anything like that. So I guess for me, I suppose it was kind of a natural thing that I found myself attracted to a lot of extracurricular activities and a lot of the other side of college life, the clubs, the societies, and all that sort of stuff. I remember somebody saying to me once, like, so I started college on a Monday, and by the Wednesday, I was first year rep for about three different societies in college.
Jesus.
And then like literally as I was going into second year in college, I was the auditor of the Societies Guild, because literally, frankly, I think I'd spent so much time at the time the accommodations office up opposite the gates on College Road. That was essentially also where all the clubs and society, or the societies, the clubs were down the road. The societies were essentially all based out of that because it was only in the later part of my college career that the student centre in UCC was built. Even I actually hosted the very very first event there when the construction was finished. So like
Wow.
you had this little clubhouse up on College Road where all the societies ran out of, and you'd be every society had a post box. You'd be going in there getting your post and stuff like that. And it was it was such a welcoming community. And for me, I suppose that was the group. Like I became far more close to the other people involved in clubs and societies probably than most people traditionally make most of their friends maybe in their own course. Yeah, I made two or three lifelong friends in my course, but I mean, I've made dozens and dozens of lifelong friends out of societies. Like even last week or the week before now, one of the friends I made in societies, a girl called Louise Kiley. Like Louise was nominated for an Emmy for her. She's a casting director, and she did the casting on that show Normal People. And you're just
Wow.
kind of going, "Yep, that's somebody I met in college. Would never have met her through my course. Purely met her because one year we were on the rugby committee together, and that like that sort of branching out and expanding beyond say the course and beyond the bubble. Like that's where I look back so fondly at my time in UCC because I was involved in pretty much all the nerd societies, as we lovingly call them, like science fiction, film. The one obviously that I was massively involved in was the Wargaming and Role Playing Society Warps.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Cool.
heavily involved in that. Won society event, society event of the year, and national society event of the year, and also won, a bunch of UCC only awards and stuff. I mean, at the time, it was the largest it was the largest independent run games convention in Europe for a time. And literally, it was literally nearly a full time gig. Like, we had our own office on the top floor of the student societies building and all sorts of stuff. Um, and it was great. It was a great experience because it's the clubs and societies. That's where you build these amazing networks of friends and colleagues that, like, at the time you're doing it so that you have somebody to go to the pub with for a pint. But like, it's when you look at it 20 years later and you kind of go, Jesus, the amount of people that I look back fondly on from UCC days, and that just I'll interact with randomly, and like every now and again, as you said, it's like your old friends from school. You'll just meet them randomly and you'll just automatically fall back into your college days and your college habits. And that's why, as I said, I think it's such a huge, important part of the college experience is to kind of branch out. And there's an awful danger that, say, especially if you go to college with, a bunch of friends from home, there's this awful danger that, well, you're doing the same course, you end up living together in the same house, and you finish your degree, and you've missed out this amazing chance of branching out. And I think it's the branching out bit is where you'll also find what your true loves are, because if you're hanging around with all the people you grew up with, there isn't that same chance that you're kind of going to branch out and suddenly realizing that you have a passion for trampolining, or that you have a passion for GAA, or that you have a passion for films or something. And that, by interacting through the clubs and societies networks, you can meet all these like-minded people. So like in college, you can have multiple personalities in college. Do you know what I mean? And you can have all these different and varied experiences. And like, you learn, it's honestly, man, it's like when you go on to your career afterwards, so long as you're constantly willing to learn, there's no such thing as failure. Like, everything is a learning experience, really. Um, and so long as you can see what you got out of it, or if it turns out being a complete disaster, so long as you're smart enough to turn around and go, I shouldn't do those again, or I shouldn't do that again, or I shouldn't go there again, or I shouldn't be doing that. That's what life ends up being about. Like, just not repeating mistakes. There's no point in trying to pretend you're going to go through life not making them, because, damn it, everybody's going to make a lot. I don't know if they'll make as many as me, but they'll make a lot. And that's the important thing with life is, I mean, is honestly, it's people who you can push, you can realize, you're self-aware enough to realize that stuff and push yourself on. Because like, when you get to a career and when you get to business, it's one of the skill sets that I've seen in so many people. Like, if you get a job in marketing in a big company, like, the best thing you can do for your career is know what's going on in the sales department, and know what's going on in finance, and like, have that larger picture of life, and like, I recognize the differences in people, and that sometimes, you'll find those differences, like, they can be huge strengths. Do you know what I mean? And that, like, I mean, look, there's no such thing as a perfect person. I think there's a lot to be learned from being smart enough to realize that there's different things for different people. And like, when I got to the end of college, like, that was a big problem for me, because a big issue for me was, I didn't really want to work in computers, and I definitely didn't want to work in economics. And I found myself kind of getting to that point of going, okay, college is over now. Like, what is next? I didn't enjoy, say, academia enough to go, oh, sure, I should do a postgrad or a master's, buy myself some time. It was like, no, I've had my time in college. I want out, but I've no idea what's next. And it was actually, it was a very good friend of mine from home, Jane, who, she didn't go to college either. She's now like managing hotels all over the world, which I just find is awesome.
Yeah.
But she said to me, like, but you come here, like, it's obvious. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, she said, all the time you were in college, like, the times that you were most passionate were the times where you were like organizing events. And I said, yeah, but I said, like, that's not a job. And she said, no, that's totally a job. I said, like, she said, hotels hire people who do nothing but organize events. And she said, like, she was working in the Lodge and Spa in Inchydoney at the time, and she said, "Oh, and last week we had a company from Dublin down here, and they do all the conferencing and event management and all that sort of stuff." And I was like, "What? Like, you can get a job organizing events for a living?" And she was like, "Yeah." And she actually went off and found the contact details for this company in Dublin that was called the Unique Group. And basically, like, I kind of sent my CV in there and kind of said, "Hey, I've done all this stuff in college. I'd really like a job organizing events. Can you do anything for me?" And literally, like, I didn't expect to get any response. And I got a response one day from a lady called Sarah McLean, and Sarah said, "Thanks for your CV. You obviously got a lot of experience in college doing events. We always have jobs kind of popping up here. Like, the next time you're in Dublin, I can be in Dublin anytime." So I remember saying to them, "Look, like, I can come up and on Friday if you want." And they said, "Oh yeah, we're doing like National Children's Day in the National Basketball Arena in Tala on Friday. Like, why don't you come up there and meet Clive, the managing director?" So of course I found my best suit and put on my best suit and headed up thinking this is going to be a job interview, my first ever job interview. And
Oh my god.
went into the National Basketball Arena, and the whole thing is just full of these giant inflatables, bouncing castles,
Yeah.
kind of jungle runs, all sorts of stuff. And I was standing there in my suit with my little folder with my printed CV in it, and I saw some guy with a unique polo shirt, and I said, "Oh, sorry, I'm looking for Clive Jackson, the MD. Is he around?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, he's down there." And he points down at one of the bouncing castles, and there's this guy down there in a blue polo shirt. And I went down and I said, "Hi, Clive. I'm DC. I think we're meant to have a meeting." And he literally just turned to me and goes, "Take the jacket off you there now." And he says, "Will you help me move this thing over there?" So
Yeah.
literally that's exactly what happened. That was my job interview, was basically like also my first time in life ever inflating a bouncing castle. So it's funny how things actually happen. So like that was my first job interview was basically shifting inflatables around the place on a Friday, thinking that we'd do that and then we'd sit down and have the job interview. So there I was in my suit lifting and shifting stuff for probably the guts of 20 minutes, half an hour. And then I thought, okay, will we sit down now and do the interview? And Clive just goes, "Can you start Monday?" So it was an easy job interview in that case. And look, look, my time in the I worked in a part of this called Unique Entertainment. We also had a company called Unique Security and a company called Unique Hospitality. So we were kind of a group of companies all in the event space. And like it is both the
Cool.
like
So
the whole thing about that company was like, we were involved in everything. We did the MTV Awards the year they came to Dublin. We did all of Microsoft conferencing. We did Aer Lingus's conference, all of their events. At the time, ESET Digiphone, which was the forerunner to O2. So ESET Digiphone in the era where they were sponsoring Eddie Jordan's Formula One car and all that sort of stuff. We did all of their events and conferencing. The equivalent would be these days, if you imagine, like, if we would have been doing, say, the equivalent of Vodafone these days. That's the scale that company was at. Essentially, at the time, it was owned by Dennis O'Brien. We ended up going to Jamaica when he launched Digicel, his network over there. So it was a roller coaster ride where no 2 days were definitely the same. This was the sort of company where one year for our corporate Christmas party, the boss took us to Euro Disney. So
wow.
it was a real kind of you were hands on. You went out, you met the client, you convinced them to give you a budget to do an event, you designed the event, but then the next day you literally went out and you'd be building the stages and the sets and everything.
What exactly was your role, DC? As in, were you an intern? Were you a set builder, or?
Yeah, so jack of all trades. So my job title was event manager. So within the company, there was three of us, and our titles were event manager, and it kind of covered both sides of it. We were like the account managers in that we would reach out to call. We were basically doing the selling, and then when you had the selling done, you also had to essentially get involved in the production side of it the amount of times that, you'd be there in your t-shirts and jeans hammering together a stage, and then like 5 minutes later you'd have to run out the back, throw on a suit, and go down and like hang out with the client for the night was unbelievable. But I suppose, look, the reason, like, it was just an amazing time of life, especially straight out of college. But the one thing that made it where it was where I discovered my real life, true passion, because when I arrived in, the portfolio that I was given to look after was essentially Dublin's marketing and PR agencies. So I was given the job of, anytime Guinness wanted to do an event or anything like that, we, you know, we ended up doing the hard work part of that equation. So that's where I really discovered my love for marketing, because obviously, like, there was nothing. I'd never done a formal marketing degree or anything like that. But like, what I got very, very good at and built my reputation on was getting attention for stuff. So if you had a product or a brand and you were launching it, and you needed to get, you needed to come up with a clever idea for how you were going to launch it and stuff, that's what I got my reputation for in Dublin. So I would have been involved in the launch of like Xbox in Ireland and Europe, multiple like phone launches. At the time, Nokia was a big thing. So like, we used to do huge events for Nokia, huge events for Microsoft. As I said, O2. I used to handle all of Guinness's sports sponsorship. So the rugby every year and the hurling every year, all the event activity around that stuff. And like, I just discovered that's what I loved. Like, I loved the event side of things. But what I really like, I suppose, more and more, I found myself getting attracted to, not just wanting to do somebody else's idea and bring it to life, but actually I wanted to be the one coming up with the idea. And
Nice.
I guess that's where then, I discovered, as I said, the love of marketing, and probably specifically branding, like just loving, falling completely head over heels in love with, certain brands, and how you could do activity. Like, Guinness was probably the first one I fell in love with, which was, learning all the multiple shades of black that the Guinness marketing department used. But when Guinness wanted to do activity around rugby or around hurling, like, they were so passionate about it being genuine, and about, what can we do here that the fans are actually going to love. There's not going to be some sort of a cynical marketing exercise. So I guess, like, that kind of led me into, my first real entrepreneurial journey, which was when I decided to I set up this business called Impact Brands. And primarily, we were in the booze business. So I mean, this is around the time of the beloved days of our boom, the Celtic Tiger, where suddenly everything was about brands, because now lots of people had money. So the only way, everybody could spend the money and have the necessities, but like, obviously, now it was like, well, now brands suddenly became very important. What you were drinking, what you were wearing, what you were driving. Um, and I had come across, I had a number of friends who were working in the drink business, and obviously the event business as well is very, very close to, say, things like hotels and venues and all that sort of stuff. Um,
Nightlife.
they're very, yeah, nightlife, like, and so you learn a fair bit about, and obviously, look, in the event business we would have also done an awful lot of, you know drinks promotions, and, as I said, working with Guinness and all that. And I'd come across somewhere, this was the height of, we were just getting into cocktails in Ireland. And I'd come across a company in New Zealand called 42 Below, which was promoting itself as the world's most awarded vodka. And I suppose, call a spade a spade, I was kind of into vodka myself, and was trying to work out, like, how would I, where could I get this in Ireland? And there was a few really specialist off licenses um, could could get it for you, but for the most part, like, you couldn't get this stuff in Ireland. And honestly, again, like, I was looking them up online. I fell in love with the brand and the style of marketing they were doing and all this sort of stuff. So I actually kind of reached out to the company in New Zealand, and I kind of went, guys, this is awesome. Like, I know I know you have an office in the UK, but like, how do you how would we get this going in Ireland? Like, how would I get bars to have this in Ireland? And they were like, well, actually, we're looking for somebody in Ireland to kind of take on the brand, and work with the team in the UK. And I just said, me, I'll do it
Nice.
for you, no bother. Not really having any idea of the logistics of stuff. Um, but I guess this, so suddenly I found myself responsible for this New Zealand vodka brand called 42 Below, and we had a gin brand called South. And the vodka also then had, like, there was the plain one, there was a passion fruit, there was a kiwi, there was a honey, and there was one called Feijoa, which apparently is like, it's the New Zealand equivalent of a potato. Everybody over there knows what a Feijoa is, and nobody in the
This
rest of the world cares.
this sounds like proper boomier stuff
Oh,
from
proper,
the Tiger, the
proper
Celtic.
boomer stuff. Like, believe it or not, I used to do a sideline doing this thing. The company had this thing called Vodka University, where they would, it was like wine tasting with vodka, and this is how boomy things were. I remember convincing like Accenture and KPMG and EY and all of these high level consulting firms that instead of taking their staff to wine tastings, they could take them to vodka tastings instead, where over 2 hours you would taste 12 of the world's top vodkas, basically shooting shots of vodka.
Yeah.
But it was incredible. Like, we did insane stuff, and I look, part of it was because we were in boomy times, but like Playboy's very, very first event in Ireland. It was, as I said, it was the light side of Playboy when they were promoting their clothing labels, but they launched a concession in Harvey Nichols in Dublin, the big
I was
fashion stuff.
thinking.
Harvey Norman's would have been more fun. Harvey Nichols, and like, we
Yeah.
we co-hosted that party that night. So I mean, for a brand that was basically running out of a little office down in Cork, suddenly we were co-hosting a party with Playboy. It was great for when you were going into bars trying to get them to stock the stuff.
Can I ask, DC, how
Yeah.
does that discussion come up? How did you get in with the Playboy event? Did you know someone, or?
So it was actually that it was a really funny one, and actually one of the biggest successes that we got in our early days in Impact Brands was, like, so what I did was I signed the exclusivity contract for the brands here in Ireland, and then I met these incredible guys in Cork, a drinks company, and still one of the biggest in Ireland, called Classic Drinks. They would have been one of these specialist kind of groups at the time. Pretty much, you go into any good restaurant or good hotel in Ireland, I guarantee you a bunch of the wine on the list is from Classic Drinks in Cork. But essentially, they didn't really do an awful lot in spirits and cocktails. So essentially, I partnered up with them. So, like, I was the face of the brand, not literally, but I was the kind of brand ambassador, and I went around doing the deals and stuff. And then, literally, once a bar agreed to kind of take it on board, I kind of literally passed them on to Classic Drinks, and the lads would handle getting the account set up and the distribution and all that sort of stuff. So
That's great.
it was a perfect partnership that way. But what had happened was Harvey Nichols had just opened in Dundrum Shopping Centre in Dublin, and it was a big deal at the time. Dundrum was only open a year or two at that stage, and this was one of the biggest UK high street brands, kind of opening. But essentially, where I did well was that in Harvey Nichols 4 or 5 stores in the UK, 42 Below was the pouring vodka of choice there. So the lads in the UK had already almost done the groundwork for me. And when they set up in Ireland, the first thing they needed was an Irish supplier for the vodka. And the food and beverage director there, a lady at the time by the name of Donna McGarry, who's still a very good friend of mine, she kind of knew that we were only a startup business, and that there was no way whatsoever that she should be picking us over, Diageo and Bacardi and all these other huge brands. But I think she kind of liked dealing with us, so therefore, anytime that she got a really high profile event in, she'd kind of give it to us first. And it was never probably in her financial advantage. But then she kind of knew that because I had the background in events, I'd make it work, that I wouldn't just show up with a couple of promo staff and give away a few free cocktails, that I'd always have an angle, or that I'd always have, something that would make Harvey Nichols look good. And I think, honestly, man, throughout my entire career, the one thing I've realized is, like, one of the best things you can do in a business is partnership, is to actually partner with other people. Like, stick in your lane, work with what you're good at, bring in partners. But when you bring in partners, like, always understand what's going to make them look good. People always say win-win, 50-50. Like, for me, I've always gone out of my way to kind of make sure that it's 60-40. Like, if I'm partnering with somebody, I'll try and make sure the partner is getting more out of the deal than I am, because then they just love dealing with you, and when partnerships come up for renewal and stuff, they'll fight your corner for you and things like that. So I think it's always important. Like, that was one of, like, that and that was the strength in what we did, in Impact Brands, was clever partnerships. Like, we partnered with the Four Seasons in Dublin. Like, in Cork, we partnered with Hayfield. So therefore, like, once you were walking into any of the bars in town and saying, oh, well, they're serving us up in Hayfield, if they wanted that classy feel to themselves, they went with us. And actually, like, to be honest with you, I would love to be still working with 42 Below, but the problem was the thing was too bloody successful. And what happened was 42 Below was actually set up by a guy called Jeff Ross, who was a director in Saatchi and Saatchi Advertising in New Zealand. And essentially, he got tired of making money for other people and went, I'm going to start my own brand. What'll I do? Well, what are the businesses that are all about branding, where all the values in the brand? And he decided that he was either setting up a perfume company or a drinks company. And he decided, since he was a guy who didn't wear perfume, he'd set up the drinks company. And 5 years after he literally started making garage vodka, one of which exploded and blew up his garage, he sold the company to Bacardi for 300 and something, $347 million or something.
Wow.
And essentially, the day that he signed his name on that piece of paper, I lost my exclusivity in Ireland, because part of
Damn.
the transfer was he sold the company to Bacardi. So essentially, once the company was sold to Bacardi, uh, Edward Dillon and company, who essentially look after Bacardi here in Ireland, they essentially took over all the rights to the products and stuff. And in the case of Bacardi also owned Grey Goose vodka. So what you found pretty quickly was, in big markets like the US and the Middle East and Australia and stuff, 42 Below is still a huge brand out there. But kind of in the secondary markets like Ireland, the UK, Europe, those sort of places, they didn't get rid of it. 42 Below still exists, and their marketing is still as epic as ever. But it's just not. It's a kind of a niche brand now that you get in high-end cocktail bars and stuff like that. You won't be getting it inside in Reardon's on a Friday night.
No, okay. You'd have to be
Yeah.
going into what's that place on Park Street? Is the Oyster Bar? Is that one?
Oh, yeah. That's the sort of bar now that would have stopped it.
The one,
It
the
was,
one that
it
I've
was the
been turned
big.
away from multiple times.
When that came to an end, it was a sad time for me, because, like, I really enjoyed working for it. Like, the drinks business is the toughest business in the world to be in, because people don't realize that, like, there's two customers, because, like, you've got to convince a bar to stock your product, but then you've also got to convince customers to come in and ask for it. Your
Yeah.
job, like in most businesses, you sell to the customer and it's done. I honestly say, to, like, if somebody ever said to me, I don't know what I want to do with my life, I would honestly say, go and work for a drinks company, because, like, you will learn more about selling and marketing and business and logistics and delivering by spending a year or two in, a decent drinks company. And it gives you just such a fun, because like, that's the thing, as I said to you earlier, like, the thing about business is, if you want to be successful in business, you got to understand how all the moving parts fit together.
When it comes to kind of the drinks industry, it's both B2B and B2C at the same time.
Yeah.
What's that called? Is there an actual name for that? Is it like
No,
B2BC?
it's because it is. I mean, it is both. That's the reality. Now, in big drinks companies, you see, it would be divided into two roles because you would have one team and they would be the B2B and their job would be get the pubs to fucking buy the cases of Smirnoff or whatever and put them in. And then you'd have a separate B2C team and their job would be, dealing with off license promotions, dealing with bar promotions. Like their job would be the pull through, of get it. But I mean, in my case, like we were doing stuff like literally, I mean, all of my friends knew that on a Friday they were going to get a text on a Friday that said, "Hey lads, we're trying to close Hayfield tonight. Will you guys go in and buy 42 Below tonight?" And literally, I'd go in on a Friday and I'd give the bar a free bottle, or I'd have, come here, I have half a bottle there in the car. Why not just give it to you for the weekend? Do you know what I mean? And I'll come back, just give it to a few customers, see what they think of it. And I'll come back in on Tuesday and we'll have a proper chat. And then, of course, literally every human being I know would be told, go to Hayfield for one drink over the weekend. And like I'd be getting a call on the Monday morning, Jesus, come here, that. Now, let me correct one thing there. We call this generic bar. The guys in Hayfield would never fall for this because they are serious operators when it comes to their drink. But it worked in an awful lot of bars. And you'd go in, and again, like, not be greedy. Come here, I'll let a couple of bottles with you for the week. And you'd kind of repeat the trick for a couple of weeks. But actually, the ironic thing then was, it was a trick and it was guerrilla marketing. But what would happen is people would be going up to the bar and, Jesus, those girls there are ordering this 42 Below. I'll have a go at that. And like, people forget the biggest sell in the drinks business is getting the bartenders to recommend your product, because like the bar manager can say all he wants, lads, we've a new drink there, like, why don't we, try and get some customers to drink it. But like it's getting the bar staff to love you and love your brand. And like, I'd call into them, and if one of them mentioned, "Oh, we're going out this weekend, it's Fergal's birthday," I'd fucking send them a slab, or I'd send them some vodka or something like that. Like, I mean, that's kind of, look, that's end to end business, and like what I found after Impact Brands, like I found that I had a very good knack for the end to end nature of stuff. So like I spent a few years then kind of essentially working as a third party consultant for some drinks companies, frankly, some hotel companies, frankly, all sorts of businesses, because I just really I liked this whole thing of going end to end, like starting with the customer picking up the product right through to, the end distribution and everything like that. And it was great because, I mean, look, from a timing point of view, this was literally deep into the recession. So there weren't jobs out there anyway. And I was very lucky that kind of, I had a kind of such a varied skill set. You could go into a company to help them out with one thing, and it would turn out that when you finished that thing, they'd have something else that they needed help with. And all the time, I didn't realize this was just setting me up really for startup life. So it kind of led me on to the best part of my career, which was where I suppose where I started my work with startups. And that was because I remember I had a job offer actually with Twitter at the time, which was that was going to be my move from self-employment into a grown-up company, was going to be to go work for Twitter in Dublin.
Wow.
And I got approached by this Cork, I love calling him this Cork butcher, because, like, man, let's call it spade, that's what he is, Pat Phelan. So Pat was at the time one of the most successful telecoms entrepreneurs in Ireland, just to be clear. But his only qualification was as a butcher. And he literally, I was going to London one day for a kind of I think it was a second or third interview for this biz dev role in Twitter, because they were just after setting up their office in Dublin, so they were still doing all the interviews in London. And I met Pat on the plane, and we were having a chat, and he kind of said to me, "Come here," he said, "would you have a look at some logos there and some branding that I've done for this new company?" I was like, "New company? Like, what's going?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, look, my time has come to an end at Cubic. I'm just looking for a new challenge, and I'm going starting this startup business, and sent me on some logos and
like Pat started Trustev himself, didn't he?
Yeah. No. So well, actually, what it was it was Pat and his co-founder, a guy called Chris Kennedy. So like when we did Trustev, Pat was in his late 40s. Chris would have been in his early 30s, and Chris was the tech genius. Chris came up with the whole idea. and Pat was basically the sales guy, money man, and the business side of things. Chris has started his career, I think, when Chris did BIS in UCC, and when he finished college, went to work for Pat in Cubic as the CTO in Cubic, and basically while he was in Cubic had this kind of mad idea to do a thing around identity verification, and essentially decided to leave Cubic and turn it into a full-time business. And basically Pat kind of said, that looks like fun, I'll go with him. And then Pat, in one conversation, it came up, and I said, "Jesus, if I'm ever going to do a startup, I want to do it with this guy." You know what I mean? Because he knows what he's doing, and he's got a fabulous network of friends and contacts and all that sort of stuff. So that's how I ended up in a small. We have to always mention the famous first Trustev office, which was City Wax, the ladies' waxing salon, or I'm sure they take gentlemen as well, down in Mahon.
No way.
Had a spare room out the back, and that was our first office.
Brilliant.
There's about 5 of us inside in it. And yeah, we got strange looks every morning going in the door to work.
I think that reminds me of Better Call Saul, where he's leaving his office the whole time and going next door into all of the girls, and he's just getting free. He's getting his nails done.
Oh, there is there's a famous CIT story that I've always wanted to have on audio that I'll share with you very quickly, which was a guy called Michael Lenihan interned with us in Trustev, and Michael was he was an incredible guy, such a hard worker. But every morning when he'd come into the office, the first thing Michael would do would go around and collect everybody's coffee cup and take them out to the kitchen to wash them. And we were going, Michael, this isn't like TV. The job of interns isn't to make coffee for the bosses and stuff. He goes, no, lads, I don't mind doing it, you're grand. Cue about 6-7 months later, his placement is up, and I on his last day, he goes, I'll do the mugs, lads. And I said to him, Michael, we'll do the mugs on your last day. And I said to him, look, what'll we do now for mugs, clean mugs when you're gone? He goes, no, he says, it's my time to go. And I thought he was being philosophical. He goes, no, he says, the girls from the waxing salon are starting to talk. So apparently Michael was going out every morning and hitting on all the girls in the waxing salon, and was dating about 3 of them. So yeah, it probably was time for him to go before they found out, But look, that's that's the great thing about startup environments. You end up doing stuff that you're utterly unqualified for, and because honestly, they start small, they grow very, very fast. I mean, in the case of Trustev, kind of 2.5, 3 years after it started, it sold for $43 million through the hard work of everybody in there. But that's the thing about startup businesses. It is work hard, but then you get to you work hard and you play hard. I know that's a bit of a stereotype, but you do, because you have to find the release. You have to let the steam out, because you're growing. You're like, the whole point in startups is you're doing 10 years of work in kind of 2 years. You know what I mean? And it is it's the hardest work you'll ever do, but it can also be the most satisfying work you ever do. And in terms of for me, getting to grow my role in terms of marketing, and getting to grow my experience, getting to have budgets to market and all that sort of stuff, like that was an incredible time. It led to when the company raised a round of investment, and Pat wanted to move to the US to grow the business over there. That was kind of part of what he had to do. Like, I just didn't have an interest in living in the US at the time. So I very much, I was kind of like, there's this thing, the 3-year itch, as people call it, like where sometimes no matter how good a job is, you're kind of thinking that you want to go on and do something else. And like, at the time, I had kind of had a back burner opportunity, which is to go and work with the guys in teamwork.com, which is just the most amazing company to come out of Cork ever. And I just took it. I at the time, I was like, it's the right move, is whatever. And like, I'll never regret it, because I went in there again. It was, even though at the time it was an established company, I mean, they were making good money, but they had no investors or no outside stakeholders to deal with. It was founder led, and it was brilliant to just go in there as essentially kind of the first non-developer and build out the marketing side of things and the sales side of things, and a bunch of other stuff as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, Peter and Dan, the 2 founders of Teamwork, are they're amazing guys, but they're like they go and they hire good people, and then they trust their people to do the job and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, I got to do fucking all sorts of stuff in there that wouldn't normally come under the category of a marketing manager, you know. And it really gave me that. It just gave me that real exposure as well between trust and teamwork. I suppose that's where like I developed that love of startups, and I got very heavily involved in the startup community both in Cork, in Ireland, overseas. Like we were Trustev and Teamwork were both recognized as top startups in Europe and top startups globally, and we got invited to events. So I mean, that's where I developed. I just loved working with founders. I loved working with businesses that were just getting started, that really didn't have a clue what they were doing, and that you had to kind of grow and learn together, And it's oh, I don't know, man. It was the best time of my life. But I mean, at the same time, again, like it's also that whole thing of you have to sink every minute of every day into it, and weekends become a blur, and you're traveling an awful lot. And like that's why I always kind of say to people, like the earlier, if you have a passion for startups, the earlier, like the best possible scenario, get into one straight out of college. No, like it'll always be the best thing possible on your CV, how I worked in a startup, because people, employers know how hard it is. As life goes on, when you start getting into having mortgages and having kids and all that sort of stuff, startups can be a very risky proposition in those times. So I always kind of say to somebody, you know what, man, take a year or two out of college where you're used to living on, low wages and a kind of an intense lifestyle. Try a startup. You'll know straight away whether you love it or not, whether it's your own startup or working for somebody else, because that's the other thing about it is not everyone is built to handle the pressure and the stress of actually owning their own business. Some people are just built to work in those sort of startups, and I kind of think I'm one of those sort of people. I think I'm a great number two, um, but I don't know, like I don't know how, like when I look at people like Pat Phelan, Peter and Dan in Teamwork, my business partners in Republic of Work, Dan Kiley and Dave Ronayne from Mainport. Man, the pressure and stress of actually, like when I look at somebody like Dan Kiley, and I think, having the pressure of having 5 or 6 thousand employees depend on you for their livelihood, that's a pretty intense bit of pressure to have on you.
So I suppose 12 years on your belt, having worked with countless startups and a very stable job with Teamwork, and you decide to go off and buy a big glass building on South Mall. How does that get into your? That's how I see it, DC. How would you like to elaborate? How does that
Yeah, you know
start?
what? It's well. Let me correct the one thing I never did was I never bought the building, but I got the
Oh,
building.
sorry. Okay.
But yeah, so the building is leased, but it was kind of the same story in that I suppose it was more related to teamwork. Like in teamwork, I got to go to the States to meet customers and go to stuff there quite a bit. And anytime you were anywhere in the States and you needed somewhere to work, you always found a co-working space. Like they were everywhere. They were on every street and all over San Francisco and New York and everywhere else. And they were
Yeah.
just so handy. Instead of you sitting in your hotel room, going insane, paying for stupid expensive Wi-Fi, you could go down to the local co-working space and you'd be sitting there, and it wouldn't be long before somebody would say to you, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm Damien. I'm working for this company or whatever." So like they were just great ways to connect into a particular city. And I guess I was great friends with during my teamwork days. I also served on the board of the Dublin Startup Commissioner, so I would have been in Dublin quite a lot, and I would have seen the great communities that would have built up in places like Dogpatch Labs in Dublin or in the Guinness Enterprise Centre, and just these hubs that built up as homes for startups. And I kind of at some point I kind of and like I kind of realized at some point that like something like a co-working space would really have a big effect. It would have a big transformational effect on startups in Cork, because what you were finding was that there wasn't a lot of day-to-day interaction
among the startups. They like anytime they would come to Built in Cork, they would meet or they'd go for coffees and stuff. Whereas, like what I saw in Dublin was when you had the startups working side by side with each other, it was game changing because like when one of them worked out how to do something, they could share that information with somebody else, so you really got that. And I mean, I had the experience of being involved in a bunch of different accelerator programs and incubator programs here in Ireland and all over the place really. And I just saw that benefit of that shared learning, I mean. And I guess so this was something that had been sitting around in my head for years and years and years. And there was a bunch of circumstances kind of came together. I was kind of will I, won't I, or whatever. And actually, a friend of mine suggested, who's great now who's great at like talking through this sort of stuff it was a friend of mine, Jane, who was actually a startup founder herself. She goes, you should talk to my dad. Like my dad is very good at this stuff. So like I went to meet her dad Dave for a few beers and stuff to try and talk through, what would I have to do? Where could I get help? How would I raise the money to start the business and all that sort of stuff. And after a couple of meetings and a couple of beers and a couple of chats, Dave kind of turned around and said, well, are you ever going to actually pitch me for investment? And I was like, what? He goes like, well, like you're telling me about all this great stuff, but like, are you going to ask me for money? And I was like, what? Like
yeah.
Suddenly realizing that like Dave all along had thought that I was giving him an investor pitch, whereas genuinely, like
you would
I just
accidentally
want like
you accidentally sold
I
it
had
to him.
accidentally found myself a business partner, and like Dave was one of the best business partners you could have for this sort of a thing because like I was coming from this fast moving startup world where everything moved fast and you could like what's Mark Zuckerberg's one, move fast and break things. You don't want to move fast and break things when you're in a building, and Dave's business, Irish Mainport Holdings, like they're one of the largest shipping companies in Ireland. They're a 40-year-old workhorse of a business, but they do all the really practical stuff. They ship supplies out to oil rigs. They manage ports and docks, the ships, the tugs, and all that. And like that was the thing I found. Like we were a great combination in that I knew kind of the startup side of things. I knew one side of things and the marketing stuff very, very well. And Dave just knew all the organizational stuff and the back end and the office and the accounting and the tax. And as well as that, there was that other kind of benefit that at the time I didn't think of, but actually became the success of Republic of Work, which was that my network of contacts was startup folk. But Dave was president here in Cork of IBEC. So Dave knew every businessman, every potential investor, like all the old school business stuff that like even startups need. So like between the two of us, like we had this incredible network. And like what Republic of Work essentially was it was a way of putting a physical front on that network. So like that's when I think of Republic of Work, that's what we wanted. It was about building a business community. It wasn't really about like building office space. It was about any company that comes in here has one thing in common. They want to grow their business. They want to like they're looking for help with sales, with marketing. Like we didn't want it to be, oh well, it's only for startups, or we didn't want it that it's only for technology companies. I mean, I suppose, we filled a gap, I think, in the ecosystem in Cork, and like I'm really proud of what we've done there, and I'm really proud of like kind of even what we did during COVID, what we're continuing to do on a daily basis in there. And I just like I suppose look I have the luxury of knowing what's coming next, and like it's going to be such an exciting it's going to really achieve what it set out to achieve, which was, let's call a spade a spade. There is no government money, there's no grant money in there. It is 100% privately owned, so it has to make money to survive and all that. But there is, I won't say philanthropic would be the wrong word, but I mean, we've added, obviously, since the start of the year, we added a new business partner in Dan and Linda Kiley. And like the focus of of everybody has always been, yes, the business has to make money, but it wants to make money in the right way, which is it wants to make money by seeing businesses be successful, not by let's put up the rates again, you know?
Before we get on to the fact that you departed Republic, had you been thinking about it for a while, or did it come from just COVID?
Oh yeah. I suppose the honest truth was, I kind of thought that, like, so Republic Work is 4 years on the go now. I kind of thought I'd be in there for two. That's why like 2 and a bit years ago we appointed Frank Brennan as the general manager in there. I mean he's been, I think we made him manager kind of about a week into his job because he was just so fucking epic at it.
Brilliant.
And honestly, like that was, like on a day-to-day basis, Frank runs everything operationally. My role was very much looking after partners, looking after some of the bigger deals and stuff like that. It was less of a day-to-day operations role. And I mean, the plan was always that maybe my plan was always, look, I'm going to give it 2 years. To get it up and running. And then at that stage, maybe we'll go and do more of them other places. Maybe we'll go and we'll do something else with other space in the building. Maybe we'll do, like, for me, it was like, I'm going to give it 2 years. And as I said, I ended up giving it 4 years for a variety of reasons, mainly because I loved it so much. But like, I suppose what I did realize, it'd be a bit like running a nightclub or something like that. You know what I mean? It would be great fun for a while, but like what I was finding was the love that I had found in Teamwork and Trustev was marketing. And it was all software marketing, and it was online marketing, and it was digital marketing, and it was all that stuff. And like, no matter how hard that got, I always loved it, and I could always push through it. When you go into a company and you're CEO and you're responsible for everything in the business, like, I had to kind of put the marketing stuff to one side, and we brought in Owen Murphy, who runs marketing now, and Owen's absolutely epic at it. But there is that kind of thing where the sad thing about being the CEO, or technically chief grown up in a business, is that you're responsible for everything, and like you don't have the freedom of just doing the stuff that you like, and you have to do the finance stuff and the HR stuff, and you have to do all the planning, and you have to do the marketing stuff, and in the case of Republic of Work, you have to do the real estate stuff, and you have to do the selling, and you're responsible for everything. And like, there's nothing wrong with any of that, but at the same time, it was kind of hard for me because, like, people actually know me for marketing, and that's where my passion is, and that's where my love is. And the other aspect of it, and why I've been thinking about it for a while, is owning a business or being in a startup is very disruptive to your personal life. It's very, you're in that kind of like living day to day mentality. You fight the battles today, and then you fight the battles tomorrow, and then you fight the battles the day after. And like, kind of before you know it, 4 years have passed. And I guess I'm don't get me wrong, I'm 43 years of age. I'm not having a midlife crisis by any standards, but I did realize that, like, if I looked forward 20 years, what would I love to be doing? And like, I couldn't but say that in 20 years' time, like, I would love to be doing something else apart from Republic of Work.
Yeah.
So COVID, so this was all like, we'd been talking about before COVID came about, sure, look, would I go down to work in a couple of days a week, and I could go off and do something else a couple of days a week, or would we make a plan for expansion, or what would we do, blah blah blah. And then kind of COVID came, and like everybody, anything that you were thinking around what am I going to do in the future was all just massively accelerated, because now suddenly it was like the world suddenly got put on pause, and then you suddenly got everybody in the world suddenly got this chance to go to think, have a lot of time to think about stuff. And suddenly you had this ultimate reset button, which was, you got all this time to think about stuff. And if you wanted to start fresh with something new, the ultimate time to do it was going to be, as we kind of came out of COVID. So I went and I had a good chat with Dave and Dan Frank and everyone else. And I just kind of said, look, when we come, I mean, look, we all worked very, very hard to get through COVID, and we reopened on the 8th of June in a kind of a limited fashion. And I kind of thought, you know what, I'd scale it back to a couple of days a week and go off and do something else. And honestly, kind of what happened was, kind of a dream opportunity came along in City Dock. And I just kind of thought, you know what, like if I want this now, I have to take it now. And if I take it, it can't be a 1 or a 2 day thing. This has to be my job now. And this has to be a 5 day a week, 6 day a week, 7 day a week. We'll say a 5.5 day a week job, which means that like my ability to stay involved day to day in Republic of Work is practically non-existent.
This is almost very bittersweet. I feel like I'm a child sitting down.
It is very bittersweet.
You're my mother telling me why you're leaving Public of Work and how things weren't working out and how you found City Dock and that you dialed back the days or whatever and you had a talk with people and that you feel the best thing for you to do is to leave, and I'm left here sitting. I'm like, will I see you at like the events anymore, DC? Or will you be at like Built in Cork?
Oh, you will. I mean, I was in there twice last week, I think. No, because genuinely, look, it's not the end of my relationship with Republic Work at all.
Yeah.
It's just that like day to day, unless I decide to, because I'm working remotely for City Dock, I might end up becoming a member in there. But no, I mean, I'm going to, like, in the end of the day, Republic of Work is the home of the Cork startup community, and like, man, I'll be stuck in the Cork startup community for the next 30, 40 years of my life, whether I want to or not. But it's just, it's like, as I said, for me, there was a little bit of selfishness in it, in that, and I will never regret it. I've given an awful lot of myself to the community in Cork, and I wouldn't take any of it back. I loved every minute of it. But there comes a time too where you're kind of going, you know what, I'd like to not have calls in the evening, and I'd like to have some weekends to myself. And when you're doing an awful lot of events like we were doing in Republic of Work, 2 or 3 nights a week, like I'd go into the office at 7 in the morning, like I did 5 days a week, and you could be coming out of there at 10 o'clock at night, and that's just not good for a personal life either. So the balance here now is, that I've gotten a grown-up job, but the balance then is that, like, while getting that grown-up job, it's just given me so much headspace. And now I don't think I like, it sounds strange, but I don't think I've ever been more passionate about the startup opportunities for Cork. And like now, I think 2021 is going to be an epic year, and I have a bunch of ideas for how we can make that well, and they'll all involve Republic of Work.
Wow.
But it means that, like, startups will go back to being my passion, and they won't necessarily be my day job, which I think means that, there's a bit of balance in that.
I'm very happy that you've making that decision to kind of step away for yourself. I think for a lot of people, especially myself, like if I'd spent 4 years of my life, to get something like Republic of Work off the ground, I don't think I would be able to step away from it, because I don't know if I'd say care too much. I suppose I don't like change, and the fact that you were like, do you know what, this is the right thing for me, I have to do it. It's very nice to see, DC.
It's part of it, man. It's part of the startup thing. Like, I mean, I feel the same way. I feel the exact same way about Republic of Work as I do about Teamwork, and as I do about Trustev. Like, it was so hard to leave Teamwork. It was because, I mean, you invest, like, when you're in a startup, you invest so much of your personal self. Like, not, when you go to work for Bank of Ireland or anybody else, you put your career and you put your best business and your best career foot forward in those places. But you come home from work at 5 o'clock on Friday and you enjoy your weekend.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in a startup, you have your 37.5 hours a week done. Whereas when you're in a startup, like what I found was with Republic of Work, on a Saturday, there are times where you'd be sitting in front of the TV playing Xbox or watching TV or doing something like that, and you'd feel guilty because you'd be going, Jesus, like, I could put that hour now into doing something for the business. And like, that's unfortunate. that's the curse of entrepreneurship. Like,
Yeah, no, I'm currently trying to get through the Last of Us. I haven't played it in 2 weeks, and
oh yeah,
every time I finish my dinner and I sit down on the couch and I pick up the controller, being like, oh, and I'm like, I have an episode to edit. I have a graphic to redo. I have to send a follow-up email. I have to get someone's. There's just something.
Well, man, because I will tell you, if you here's the thing that people should really do: go and look at the most successful people that you know, and the one thing that you will find with them all is that they know how to switch off.
Yeah.
You will not. You could have 1 million. You could have 10 million in your back pocket, and you will not get Pat Phelan to take a meeting on a Saturday and Sunday. They are his time for his family, his grandkids. The same, you know. You look at guys like Dan Kiley. Dan, one of the hardest working people that I've ever met in my life. But like, you know, he'll go off and like, you know, people probably seen it on Instagram. Every now and again, he gets the opportunity to go off and play tennis with Richard Branson, and he goes and he does it for himself, or he goes to Wimbledon for himself, or you know, the most successful people. They're the people who know how to recharge their batteries. Like they know how to go and do something completely unrelated to the business, recharge the batteries, and come back to stuff. And that's honestly, I would say, that's actually, since I left Republic of Work, that's a skill that I'm starting to develop and that I definitely didn't have, because I'm seeing now that, like, you know, the perspective and recharging at the weekends and recharging at the evenings. I'm seeing that it just makes you so much more productive when you are switched on to the work vibe, you know. So I just think, you know, that's been the big learning for me, and I have a long way to go, but it's exciting. It feels like, as I said, because it's not just moving to a new job, but it's kind of, you know, it's almost, for me, I'm making it sound more like a midlife crisis all the time. But I didn't buy a fancy car or anything like that. I did buy a Prius, all right. But you know, for me, it's that next phase of my life where it's just a bit more about balance, and it's a bit more about trying to actually pick up the lessons that I've learned from working with great people like Pat and Dan and Dave and Peter Cottinger and all these guys, and actually realizing, yeah, actually, I was always admiring them for their business skills, but actually, they have their business skills because of how good they are at looking after themselves in their personal lives and stuff.
Before we finish up, DC, I'd really like to know how you got involved with City Doc and what exactly it is that they do.
City Doc is a London-based healthcare company that was started about 16 years ago. And here's the easy answer: by my oldest friends, a guy called Owen McSweeney, and his identical twin brother Rory McSweeney.
Nice.
And Owen basically is Owen's a doctor and Rory's a dentist. They like talk about twins not being different. Owen, when we finished college, Owen went to London, set himself up as a GP, built out this chain of clinics called City Doc, and they got into a whole pile of stuff like medical legal work, dealing with big corporates, and you know, they built this network then of pharmacies across the UK, about 150 pharmacies. So you know, you can walk into any one of these pharmacies and you can get your travel vaccinations, sexual health, all that sort of stuff. And essentially, CityDoc are providing the back end for all that sort of stuff. So an incredibly successful business, and you know, like anybody would have, every now and again over the last 15 years, Owen would be ringing me, asking me for just, you know, talk business, ask for a bit of advice, check out ideas, that sort of. So we always had that relationship talking about business. And of course, the big change that they've had in their business is that they're also one of the largest vaccine providers in the UK. So from a practicality point of view, they're one of the biggest COVID-19 testing bodies in the UK. Like we probably we actually do more COVID tests every day than the Irish government are doing.
Oh my God.
And obviously they had this, so I mean, obviously they've had a period where they had this very well managed business that had, these 150 pharmacy partners, probably about 40 clinics in all across the UK. And then suddenly COVID hits and a lot of their physical business goes down, but then a lot of their testing business just suddenly goes into the stratosphere, you know what I mean, true, because of COVID and stuff like that. And they never had a strong marketing focus or anything like that. But I mean, look, in the end of the day, I knew about the business. I was excited about the business. And when Owen asked me to come on board and look after the marketing and the online and the technical stuff and all that sort of stuff, I kind of jumped at the chance because, how often do you get a chance to work with your best buddy? I mean, there's like as I said, I've been lucky that I've had bosses who have become some of my closest friends. But in this case, I literally got to work with my best buddy. So therefore, like, he knows I have his back, I have his, he has my back. And like, I went into the company, and the idea was obviously like working remote from Ireland. But I mean, I was in the business about 2 or 3 weeks, and suddenly he turns around to me and kind of goes, "Look, you've got such a good handle on all the parts of the business outside of outside of just the marketing and digital side of the business. Would you basically take the role of chief operating officer?" Right? And I said, "Look, I'll give it a shot." And it's the most exciting role I've ever had. I absolutely love it.
Wow.
Genuinely, it's. I don't want to make a sweeping statement like this is the job I was born for, and then get fired next week. Like, this is the busiest job I've ever had, but also the least stressed I've ever been in work. Um, because I just feel like, because I honestly feel like the job of the chief operating officer, you're the Swiss Army knife of the business.
Mm.
And I kind of feel like all of the work and all of the experience that I got in places like Trustev and Teamwork and Republic of Work, the consulting, the drinks business, and all that, it has just built up that Swiss Army knife set of skills that that's needed in the business here. So I mean, you're the chief operating officer, as I said, I'm Will Riker from Star Trek. I mean, I'm number one. I'm the right hand man of the CEO. My job is to go on all the dangerous away missions and potentially put my life at risk for the business. And my job is to implement the vision of the CEO and the board of the company. Um, so that involves an awful lot of coordination. So essentially, the senior management team in the business, our head of pharmacy, our head of clinics, our head of commercials, our clinical directors, all those people, they all report into me, and I structure everything so that all the reporting is done, all the bits and pieces are in place, and I filter all of that through to the CEO and the board of management. So it really, I mean, it really is. I'm Riker from Star Trek. Like, it's that, like, Riker is the COO of the Enterprise, if anybody wants to put it that way.
Okay.
And like, what I'm finding fascinating is it's just this great combination of the people skills of getting on with the various leaders in the business, all of whom have been there for substantially longer than me. Um, and kind of, like, just talking to them all on a daily basis and going, "Look, what's holding you up? Like, what's in your way?" And then that's my to-do list. And sometimes it's they're not getting on with one of the other heads, or in our case, say, "Hey, we're getting all this testing done, but the results team in the business aren't getting results out fast enough." So like, it's really my job is kind of, helping the senior management in the company to do their jobs. And like, it requires an awful lot of flexibility and an awful lot of, you have to know a bit about sales and a bit about marketing and a bit about distribution and a bit about this and a bit about that. And look, I'm lucky that that's what I've picked up. So now I get to do a job where it involves all those individual bits and pieces, and as I said, involves at a very exciting time for our business, where we're doing, like, we still have the business that we had. I mean, yes, we're not doing as much as maybe in the travel vaccination area, because not as many people are traveling. But then, we have tens of thousands of people every day, whether it's like, say we're working with some of the biggest airlines in the world to test their crew and cabin crew and all that to make sure that they're safe to fly. We also have, like, for passengers, there's about 22 destinations worldwide that when you touch down in those airports, you have to have a COVID-19 test that's been done in the last 72 hours. So the logistics of us being able to, provide a test for somebody in 72 hours in any part of the UK is not that easy. So it's so like we see ourselves, we know we'll be busy until the end of the year, helping out with COVID-19 testing in the UK. We'll also look at some point, then there will be a vaccine, and then we will be, as one of the largest like we're definitely the largest private vaccines company in the UK, and we're part owned by a company called European Life Care, who are one of the biggest vaccines company in Europe. So when it comes to the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine, we know we'll be involved in there somewhere. And then, to be honest, as I said, we've just got these great, like, between the pharmacy partnerships and the travel vaccinations and all that, like, we've got a really solid core business as well that's going to grow and grow and grow. And hopefully, look, I would have an aspiration that at some stage next year we'll grow into Ireland, because it would just, I mean, look, we have lab facilities and stuff here already, so I mean, it would be a reasonably straightforward proposition. And I just think that's where healthcare is going. People want have a different vision of healthcare, and it's more digitally enabled, and it's more app focused, and it's going to be more about analytics and all this sort of stuff. And I just think, look, we're because instead of us being say a startup or a tech company trying to learn healthcare, like, we're a healthcare company that has, as I said, our CEO is a doctor. We have a large number of medical professionals on our staff. So we're a healthcare company that's just learning to be digital, which I think gives us a heads up, because it just makes it far, like, the patient, like, we don't have any customers. Like, all of the people we interact with are patients, in the sense that even if you just go online to our website and buy a test kit by post, we treat you, your data, and your whole experience as if you were a patient, not as if you were an e-commerce customer.
Very exciting times ahead for CityDoc, so, and yourself.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And I mean, like, we're also doing a rebrand at the moment, so
Oh,
that's gotta be
cool.
done as well. And of course, in this case, as well as our, like, website and business like the usual stuff that I'm used to rebranding.
Yeah.
Like, we've got a bunch of physical infrastructure. Like, there's signs and there's wall paint and all sorts of stuff that has to be done. So that's a very exciting project as well. To now, as I said, that's our head of marketing is looking after that, but, like, I'm still deeply involved in it.
Do you plan on moving DC anytime soon, or do you reckon you'll stay around Cork for a bit longer, especially with the startup scene here? What are your plans?
Oh, as I said, the plan. I mean, I'm not physically going anywhere. I'm working remote from Cork. And obviously, when COVID allows, I'll be traveling back and forth a bit more. But, like, Cork's my home, and Cork's where I'm staying. So, as I said, once I've had maybe a couple of months under my belt, I'll be swinging back into the startup side of things in Cork. Because honestly, I think 2021. I mean, you only have to look at what's going on around the place with the Work Vivos and all of the other greats. I mean, most of the successful Irish startups this year have come out of Cork. So we need to capitalize on that now. So yeah, it won't be long before you'll all be sick of the sight of me again.
DC, are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
I am ready.
Apple or Android?
Apple.
Windows or Mac?
Mac.
Did you have any other thoughts for the name other than Republic of Work?
Yeah, it was originally called Work Republic, but there was a German company called that, and my golden rule: don't mess with Germans.
Very good. Would you rather hear the good news or the bad news first?
Bad news first.
How do you like your steak?
Oh, I have to cook it, and it has to be medium.
If you could invest in any Irish company, which would it be?
Oh, that's mean. That's really mean. I'll give you the answer. It's really weird. It's a Cork company called Queen Bee Athletics. They're a clothing company down in Carrigaline, and they are epic, and they are going to be huge. And they've just built such like they've spent years building such an amazing organic audience, that I just think that I think they're destined for greatness.
Would you rather never have a smartphone again or never have a laptop again?
I'll never have a laptop again.
PlayStation or Xbox?
Xbox. I launched Xbox in Europe. That's not a fair question to ask.
Any bottles of 12 Below or South left lying around?
Yes, I have a set of all of them in my office here in front of me, but nobody ever gets to open them because they're my last five.
What's a failure that's helped you to learn?
So yeah, I think actually probably the biggest one was when Impact Brands finished, as in like I never realized that literally the door could get closed that fast on me. That literally the day that somebody else in the US signed a signature, my business was basically over. So I've learned an awful lot from that in terms of making sure, that just planning ahead a bit better so that no one incident can be fatal.
Instagram or Twitter?
Oh, Twitter.
Twitter or LinkedIn?
Twitter.
If you had to eat the same dish every day for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, that's really hard. I've eaten the same dish every day for the last 7 days, which
Okay.
is because I'm on a bit of a healthy binge at the moment, which is chicken and Mexican vegetables. In fact, the only reason I use Instagram is for food photography, and Twitter then is where all the important stuff happens.
Marvel or DC?
Marvel, which is ironic given my name, but I keep fighting against DC for usernames everywhere. But yeah, like I mean, I'm Marvel since birth.
That's great. You're such a nerd. I love it, DC.
I know.
um, if you could use the Force, would you be on the light side or the dark side?
That's a very tricky question. I'm gonna say the light side just because they have cooler lightsabers. Like all the bad guys, all the dark side guys are all red, and I just don't like red like as a color as well.
What do you owe your What do you owe your success to in one word?
Friendships. That's nerdy, I know, but friendships. Like all my successes have all come across because of stuff that friends have done for me.
Do you check your emails first every morning or your socials?
Emails. I'm finding actually I've turned off an awful lot of my social notifications, because I've realized that you can check it a couple of times a day, and like the world hasn't exploded. Whereas with your emails, you need to check them more often, or because your business could have exploded. Like
How would you define happiness?
for me, happiness will be finishing work on a Friday, knowing that I've put in a good week, knowing that I've stuff to look forward to at the weekend, and that I don't have to think about work at the weekend. Like that'll be my happiness. Like I'm not looking for this big work life balance, but I just want some bit of balance in everything.
Would you rather give bad advice or take bad advice?
I think I'd rather take bad advice because I would hate to be. A lot of the people I give advice to are young companies and startups, so I would fucking hate to be giving them bad advice. So I'd take the bullet.
Best piece of career advice you've ever been given?
Go where your passion is, not where the money is. Like if you're good at what you do, you'll get rewarded for it. Like don't follow the money. Just find what you're good at and what you can do better than other people, and follow that. Like
What's your favorite book?
ooh, this is tough now. Do you know what, man? I honestly think probably one of my favorite books, and a book I read over and over and over again, is I read Richard Branson's autobiography. Actually, I love reading business bios, and like his book, Losing My Virginity. I mean, it's aged a bit now, but it's awesome.
Hmm.
Or probably one I've read recently that I really love is Business for Punks, which is the Brewdog autobiography, and I think that's essential reading for startups these days. Like,
If you could have a completely different job for just a day, what would it be?
oh, what would I love to do for just a day? I think I'd like to do something completely mad. Like, I think I'd love to work in like Formula One or something like that. Now, I wouldn't advise leaving me anywhere near the cars, but like, I've always liked the kind of, like, I'm not even into cars. Like, I really am not into cars, but I just think there's something about that business and the kind of empire that it's built. Like, I just think it'd be very interesting, like, to have a look under the hood for a couple of days, if you pardon the pun. Like,
All right, DC. We've been here for quite some time. We've
have.
had a bit of a technical difficulty moment as well, but I'm
You will
sure.
be tested in your editing ability now to make any of that sound interesting for people. But I hope there's something in it for people. And as I said, look, given the audience and stuff like that, all I would say to you guys is, in up to the age of 30 is your time to experiment with your life, with your career, with your job, with everything, really. Like, and do that. Like, don't think that you finish college and you go into something and that's the career for the rest of your life. You're great. You all qualify as millennials automatically, so therefore people are expecting you all to be flaky and change jobs every 2 years. So take advantage of that and try out a few things, and see what sticks. And as I said, see where your passion is. Go with that, because like, there are great job. You'll be offered great jobs out of college with big money, and honestly, anybody I know who's ever taken those sort of jobs is either miserable right now or ended up leaving them after a year or two. Just follow your passion and the money will come.
Thanks very much, DC, for sharing that wisdom with us. And thank you for joining me on today's episode. You've been extremely generous with your time, and have been for the last 2 years that I've known you. You've always been an absolute gentleman to talk to, and just thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.